What's up, A Pushers? Today we're going to start going over the 1920s with Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge, and then, well, everybody's Herbert Hoover. So the first thing you need to know about the 1920s is it's a return to this normalcy. It's a return to pre-World War I conditions, a return before everyone started with the progressive movement and everybody had to sacrifice and tax a lot for World War I. And so the big thing you need to know is that it's going to be laissez-faire government. It's going to be easy credit. It's going to be taxes. Tax cuts for the rich. You're going to have imperialism go now to isolationism, and you're going to have a bunch of Republican presidents during this time. All the presidents from the 1920s are Republican, with the exception of Woodrow Wilson for a year. Number two that you need to know about Warren G. Harding is the Budget and Accounting Act. And basically what this does is it gives the federal government more say in how spending happens. And the president submits a budget every year to Congress, and he still does that. And it tries to stay a balanced budget. The number three here, the Emergency Quota Act. You need to know that America now, the 1920s is all about conflicts. Sometimes it's sexual conflict, sometimes it's racial conflicts. And for this one, basically, we are scared of communism. You got to remember that 1917 was the Russian Revolution, and now Americans are freaking out because we just went through the Red Scare, and we had the Palmer raids, and so what we're having is nativism. You don't like immigrants because, well, they might take your jobs, they might be communist, which applies during this time, and then, well, they're just different, and we have a hard time dealing with differences because we don't really know what to do with it. So the big takeaway is you need to know that we do not like immigrants from South and Eastern Europe, because that's where communism is spreading, and that's going to lead you over here to the Sacco and Vanzetti trial. Two guys are going to be accused of a crime of a murder that basically everybody knows they didn't commit, but they're still going to get the electric chair because they're communist. Number four, what you need to know is that in terms of foreign policy, we don't want war again. We don't want to go through that. And so we have the Washington Naval Conference, and the goal is disarmament and no more war. And we even have our secretary, Charles Evans Hughes, he says we're going to blow up 30 of our battleships. We don't actually do that, but it sends a message to these other countries that show up in Washington, D.C. at this little conference and say, oh yeah, well, if the United States is like agreeing to blow up their ships, well then maybe we should stop producing as many weapons. Unfortunately, what's going to happen is that Germany, under Adolf Hitler later on, is going to start rearming as everyone else is not building up because they don't want to have a war. The World Court, the goal here is, of course, not to have any more war. Warren G. Harding says, yeah, we didn't join the League of Nations, but we'd like to join this thing, but we never do. We'll talk about that later. In terms of Latin America, the United States and Colombia settled the Panama Canal. We say, look, we were wrong to kind of overthrow your government and create the country of Panama. Eventually, we're going to try to make things up to you, and we'll give you, once we pay off all the debts and everything that it took us to build that thing, we'll give control back over to you. And that actually officially happens in the 1970s. It was supposed to happen before, but whatever. We also decreased our troops in Nicaragua, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic for now. The Ohio gang. Warren G. Harding is just like President Grant. He's not a bad man, but he's got some pretty bad friends who get themselves involved in some scandals. There are some good cabinet members like Charles Evans Hughes and Herbert Hoover, who is going to be supposed to be a great president, and then he gets stuck with the Great Depression. The Ohio gang is responsible for all these scandals. The most important that you need to know is Teapot Dome. Basically, people were selling the Navy oil reserves. The Secretary of the Interior, Albert Fall, said, well, we're not going to use the oil for the Navy anymore. We just said we're going to blow up 30 battleships. So you know what we're going to do? I'm going to sell it. And he makes about $360,000 off of this deal. You have other people that make money off of kind of working with the paperwork and taking about millions of dollars, about $10 million away from veterans, which is pretty shady business. So this whole thing is the Ohio gang and scandals. The big thing is scandals, and that connects to a couple things across time and space. It's going to connect to, of course, President Grant and the Great Barbecue, and it is also going to connect to Watergate, and it's also going to connect to Bill Clinton and the Monica Lewinsky sex scandal. I did not have sexual relations with that woman in the 1990s. Last but not least, as I alluded to earlier, is Sacco and Vanzetti, two Italian immigrants, and they're going to get the electric chair, even though it's very clear that they're innocent. And it shows that, look, America in the 1920s, on the outside it looks like, oh, it's like the Great Gatsby, it's boom, 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 boom. But underneath it, the social issues and the conflicts that are emerging is, well, something to be at least thought about. Have a good day, pushers. We'll start our